Season 14 is finally here, and I believe that Yasuo's build diversity has finally blossomed, as mythic items really shut him down on what he could and couldn't build. But finally, with them being removed for Season 14, what does Yasuo build? What are we supposed to be doing as Yasuo mains? And let me tell you that there is a lot of hope for Yasuo players because the build diversity has just skyrocketed with the removal of mythic items. And of course, I will talk about builds and runes for this up and coming Season 14 Yasuo guide. So let's just get runes out of the way because I know people are still going to ask what the best runes are. And obviously Yasuo's page just hasn't changed for a long time. Letho Tempo, Triumph, Alacrity, and then Last Stand can be interchanged between Coup and of course Last Stand. Just based on matchup. If you feel like you're in harder matchups, go Last Stand. If you're in winning matchups, go Coup. Just the best way to go. And of course, Resolved is always the next runner up for the best secondary tree for Yasuo, as you just want either Bone Plating or Second Wind, just based on matchup, of course. Bone Plating is better for melee, Second Wind is better for range, and then you're going to go Revitalize or Unflinching, and it's just really, again, based on matchup, as you will find out throughout the entirety of this video. That's going to be like the phrase of the video, and you're going to go Revitalize just in general, but if you feel like they have a lot of CC, then go with Unflinching. And then finally, you're going to go Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and then Armor or Magic Resist, based on if you're going up against AD or AP. So now onto the whole reason why I know 99% of you are here. Builds. What are the best builds for Yasuo? And I'm just going to cut right on into it. The item that you're always going to want to get, no matter the situation, is of course Greaves. This is going to be the absolute item you always want to get on your first back, if at all possible. And then from there, this is where things start to get a little spicier because the core items for Yasuo are not what a lot of people are assuming. So the core items for Yasuo right now, I believe, are Bork, Kraken, Wit's End, or Iceborne Gauntlet. I know a lot of people are a little bit confused by this because from what I've seen the Yasuo subreddits and just Yasuo players in general say is that Kraken and Infinity Edge are like the two items you have to get and then everything else is situational, but I think that's wrong. I think that Yasuo actually has a lot of really good potential builds at the moment this season, and these four items always seem to make their way into my build somehow, and they always seem to be first or second builds. And I think the reason for that is because one, Kraken is extremely strong. You just get a lot of damage output. You get everything you want. AD, attack speed, crit chance. It's a wonderful item for Yasuo. And if you are ahead or if you're winning your lane really hard, I think that Kraken Slayer is like a must to just rush because this item will allow you to continue to dominate. And then from there, you have Bork, which I think is like the next best thing to Kraken. I tend to build this if I really need this slow, if I'm not winning lane into matchups that might be a little bit harder. It's tankier. They are going to be building a lot of health. A good examples, I've seen a lot of Vladimirs already. I know with, of course, AP abusers out there. Just anything like that, it just makes a lot more sense to go Bork than it does Kraken because one, you get lifesteal, and then you're also still doing a lot of damage. So at the end of the day, I think that Bork is like the next best thing right after Kraken. And then really, these aren't rush items. I tend to build Wit or Gauntlet as like second items. So generally, I either have Bork or Kraken at this point. So it's Boots, Kraken, or Bork, and then I'll go Wit's End or I'll go Iceborne. Now, if the enemy team is extremely heavy AP, like I'm talking 4 AP champions, then I actually just end up rushing Wit's End, especially if they have a lot of CC, because Wit's End now gives you tenacity, which is massive for Yasuo. So I think this item is phenomenal. And then if the enemy team is super AD heavy, then I go right into like an Iceborne Gauntlet after I get either Bork or Kraken, as this allows you to really get that extra tankiness that you need, because one of the biggest problems with Yasuo this season is just survivability. So from here, we now have the situational items. So at some point, whether you're like 15-20 minutes into the game, you're going to probably have your Greaves. You're going to have one of these items up here. Maybe you have an extra one here as well. So let's just, as an example, say you have Greaves, you have your Kraken, and let's say you have your Wit's End. You're going to want to pick up one of these situational items. Most of the times, in like 99% of my games, I am almost always going Shield Bow third. Again, the key to the season is survivability. With AP champions bursting you out like absolute mad lads, you want more survivability. The extra lifesteal and the extra shield have come in handy. just way too many times, more than I can even count. I think this item is just phenomenal. And plus, if you are going with this type of build, you're not going to have a 100% crit chance. So you need to finish off your crit items to maximize Yasuo's damage potential. And Shield Bow just screams the perfect item at the moment. And then from here, the rest of these items I've picked up once or twice. The only item I haven't really touched so far are Hole Breaker and Maw, just because obviously if you get Shield Bow, you're not getting Maw. But the rest of these items I have basically tried out, and I think that they work fine with Yasuo, of course, in those very situational or dependent scenarios where you might need healing reduction, you might want a little more damage, you might need a little extra survivability. It just really comes down to the scenario at hand. Now, I'm just going to throw this into the video because I know people are going to ask me, have you tried the new items on Yasuo? No, I haven't. I have done a little bit of testing in norms, but not ranked. So I don't count norms games just because I think that those are obviously very skewed. In ranked games, I refuse to try these items because I just don't think they're good on Yasuo. I thought that Hexplate and Terminus were going to be phenomenal, but just looking at Yasuo's build path this season, I haven't found a reason to go with these items over the ones that I have, just because they just don't do as much for Yasuo as you would think. The only item on here that I think might be possible is Sundered Sky, but I haven't tested it out myself. I don't know if any Yasuo players have. You guys can leave a comment down below. I don't think Sundered Sky would be like the perfect item for Yasuo, but just because it's super broken right now, it could have potential with Yasuo. It's a good item to maybe get like 4th, 5th, or 6th, I can imagine, right? Like it's a super late game, not a rush item, not an item you're going to get right away. So there is potential for it, but I haven't tried it, so I can't specifically say if it's good or not. But anyways, I haven't really tried the newer items. I just don't think they're that good on Yasuo. I've heard from PZ Zhang, I've heard from the Yasuo community, I've asked a bunch of my friends, and even with norms testings, if I'm going to throw that in a little bit, I haven't found any success with these items. So now, what are some example builds for Yasuo? And I'm just going to throw this out here. This build right here is still viable. I know that I may have trashed on it a little bit, but it is still good, but I only ever build it when super ahead. I have found again that the name of the game for Yasuo this season is, are you going to do enough damage before you die? Because everyone is bursting you out, especially AP champions. And I find that if you go this build when behind, you are going to suffer so hard. So generally speaking, I almost never go with this build unless I am super, super ahead. So now for the builds that you're most likely going to end up going. And if you're up against really tanky health stacky champions, I find that Boots into Bork is a very, very good combination. And then from there, you can go Kraken into Shield Bow. This just basically finishes off your 100% crit. And the last 2 items can be situational. So if you're ahead, just go IE. Why not, right? Get a little bit more damage and you can just snowball your lead even more so. If you feel like you need that extra bit of survivability, then stuff like Death Dance, GA are all phenomenal items. If you need a way to get out of CC because they have someone like a Morgana, then you can go like Mercurials. Obviously, again, last items are always situational. Now, if you're going to be going into a very heavy AD team, then I highly recommend, obviously, of course, get your Greaves into Kraken, and then you want to get Iceborne. Iceborne is a phenomenal item right now. I think that even before Season 14, when this was a mythic item, it was still phenomenal on Yasuo. And then, of course, you can finish it off with a Shield Bow. And, of course, the last 2 items, again, situational. Get it based on the state of the game, the state of whoever is fed, and just figure out from there which items you find to be the best. And of course, the last one is versus just heavy AP. Generally, I don't rush Wit's End all that much, but if they have like 4 AP champions, then I will just end up getting a Wit's End because this item is just very, very strong. And then, of course, from there, you can get a Kraken. Now, you can always interchange the 2 items. You can get Kraken into Wits, but if they do have a lot of AP, I find that the resist plus tenacity is just extremely useful. Now, before I wrap up the items, I know a couple of you guys may throw this in here. I think after watching PZ and, of course, even testing it out myself, Zeal is phenomenal to get after your first item buy. So as an example, let's just say you pick one of these builds. Let's say you're just going to go Boots into Kraken, and then from there you see that they have a heavy AD team, so you're going to get like Iceborne or something. You can actually throw in the Zeal right before you get your Kraken. So that's, or right after, excuse me, you get your Kraken. So you go Greaves, Kraken, Zeal, and then you get Iceborne. The reason you want Zeal is for the same reason that any Yasuo player has basically picked up Zeal before it was ever changed. And that is because the gold efficiency of this item has basically always been phenomenal. You're getting attack speed, you're getting crit chance, you're getting move speed for an item that costs you the exact same as boots. It is very cheap, it is very gold efficient, and it just makes Yasuo feel a lot smoother when you're playing him. So yes, in any single one of these builds, you can always throw in a Zeal after your first item pickup. It is completely fine. It just basically rounds out and smooths out that Yasuo build a little bit better. I don't always do it myself, but I know that a lot of Yasuo players, especially PZ himself, just love throwing in Zeal right now just because it's one of those items that you can just grab to really solidify that early mid-game Yasuo spike, because the item is just super cheap and super gold efficient. Now, for those of you wondering where I basically do all this testing, it's on my main account, Dr. Yas, of course, and I've done a lot with winning, a lot with losing, as you guys can see, and I actually, the build I've tested the most is actually, surprisingly, the Infinity Edge build. And that's why I know it's not the best Yasuo build, because every time I've built it, I have felt awkward. It's felt weird. I either feel like if I'm behind, I just never get ahead, and when I'm super ahead, then that's the only time I find the build to be the most effective, because you can keep that lead, you're doing the most damage with, of course, Kraken and Infinity Edge, but then you just don't have any survivability. And if you're in that situation where, let's say you are like 12-2 or something, and all of a sudden you go in and then you get popped one shot, you're losing that 1k bounty. Yasuo is not a late game champion. He is an early mid-game skirmisher. That's where he shines. And if you're losing these bounties over and over again, you're feeding into the enemy team that is most likely rocking some kind of late game AP champion like Syndra or Xerath, and you will get just absolutely destroyed. So I find that survivability has come in a lot more handy. So these couple games up here where I've started to really test out a lot more of these builds alongside earlier games in the season, I think that the best builds are always situational, but if you're going boots into Kraken, from there it's really just dependent. Are you going to go Iceborne? Are you going to go Wit's End? Are you going to go Shield Bow? It just really comes down to what you think is the best situation. And of course, you don't even have to go boots into Kraken. It could be boots into Bork, and that is another phenomenal build. So when it comes down to it, play each build by ear. What does the team have that you need to counter? That is the best thing to do as a Yasuo player right now, and I absolutely love that, because build diversity is something I have been screaming for ever since the mythic items have come out. But since their removal, Yasuo's build path is flexible and it's amazing. So there you have it. That is the Season 14 Yasuo build. I am super excited to share this with you all, because first of all, this is my big return, and yes, I don't have any videos on my channel anymore because I did remove all of them out of a big mistake, but that is not something we will talk about in this video. It is something I can explore in another video if you guys want me to. But other than that, just leave that down in the comment section below. But let me know what you guys think. What are your builds you're running? What do you think are the best builds for Yasuo in Season 14? This is just something I've gathered from my games and, of course, doing research on PZ Zhang himself. So at the end of the day, this is what I believe to be the absolute best Yasuo builds for Season 14. But with that being said, I love you all. Can't wait to see you all in the next one. As usual, take care, and of course, peace out.